Hi there. Tonight is Samhain, which is the Celtic New Year. This is Celtic New Year's Eve. But it's also the festival of death, because this is another year of death, another year of causing death, another year closer to death. When we think of the Church of Nowhere, and we think of the Trinity, the Church of Nowhere, it is, of course, annihilation, which occurs at death, when all brain activity ceases forever, and you move into a state of oblivion, which is forever. And if the human race goes into annihilation and oblivion, then it will become extinct. So extinction is what awaits the human race, the species. And when you think about it, this is only just and deserving, really, because the human race is definitely a rum species. And one of the things about an individual is the great moral precept is antinatalism, because it really, really is immoral to bring in a new life into this world. And I say this at the time of death, because death is a sweet oblivion. Death is moral. Death is righteous. Death is proper. Death is a good thing. Because when you think about it, we are born into pain, and we are also directly or indirectly the causes of pain. And you may say, what about pleasure? Pleasure is illusory, pleasure is temporary, and pleasure is usually at someone else's expense. And what about altruism, you'll say? Well, altruism is just the expression of ego. And if it wasn't for the poor and the desperate and the disabled for you to be altruistic about, well, you wouldn't be altruistic. It's only because there is pain and suffering that you can be altruistic as much as you like, and congratulate yourself on how altruistic you are. So to bring another child into this world of pain and death, and to bring another child into this world that becomes either directly or indirectly a causer of suffering and death. You know, I mean, Osama bin Laden had a mother, would you believe? Something gave birth to the creature. Something gave birth to Donald Trump. Something gave birth to Tony Blair. Someone. So you see, if it was something, it would be all right. But if it's someone, then you can hardly blame it on the demons and the hobgoblins and things that go bump in the night. They didn't create Tony Blair and Osama bin Laden and Donald Trump. You know, they weren't there at all. It was the immoral act of bringing another baby into the world. And some people say, well, this is dark satire. No, this is logic. I mean, you know, future persons have no moral ontology, all right? But that works both ways. You say I don't owe anything to any future generations. I don't owe the gift of life to future generations. And that's true. You don't. So if you don't give the gift of life to any future generations, then that is your moral imperative satisfied. Really, that's you've done well. You've done the most beautiful, the most moral thing you can possibly do. Okay, because then you don't owe future persons anything if they don't exist, and they wouldn't exist if you were an antinatalist. And finally, the dissolution of thought. It's a stream to flow with. Yes, sometimes you might discover there might be substances, or you might go into a trance or something, or you might be near to death. When you experience all thought to be a stream, and the only way to go with that stream is to flow with it, because immediately you try to block or dam up that stream, that thought becomes obsession. That thought becomes something you can't let go of. So letting go of your thought, letting go of your life, preparing your life for death, is in fact the great objective of existence. And again, if you don't put any future generations through this having to go with a stream of thought until it ceases, then you'll be doing them a great favour. Because I can tell you that fear of death and greed for life is one of the things that powers all harm. So again, future generations, if they don't exist, they don't have the fear and the greed to go through, and they don't have the harm that they will do. And people say to me, well, how great is the adventure? You know, life is a great adventure, etc., etc. But those are all people that have a very callous attitude to human life, in my experience. And, you know, they live for the moment of pleasure, and then they regret it when pain comes. They don't mind giving it out, but they don't like getting it back. Okay, so meditation comes in here, which is one of the great pillars of the Church of Nowhere, of course, because meditation means you go into the here and now, you go into the stream of thought, and you don't dam up the thought, you don't become obsessed with the thought, you just let it pass all the way through you. Hello thought, goodbye thought, rising and falling like an endless ocean of waves, because that's all thought is, really. And all the rest of it is reaction against greed and fear, mostly fear. When you think about it, fear is what makes everybody operate. It's what motivates everyone to do everything that they are doing today. Fear of scarcity, fear of death, fear of being upstaged, fear of being dominated, and guilt and fear go together. Guilt is the fear of what other people might think of you, which we all have to a degree. Fear of not belonging to the peer group, fear of the out group, fear of the in group, fear of the rules of the game, fear of the consequences of disobedience. There is nothing good about positive existence at all. I mean, positive cosmos, anti-cosmos sentiments arise out of this as well, because the whole cosmos is a mistake. I mean, it was just matter and antimatter coming together, and they didn't quite mesh up. And where they didn't quite mesh up, you've got the birth of the single hydrogen atom during the Big Bang and the birth of time. So, actual fact, the whole matter, the whole cosmos is a mistake. It should never have happened. It should have been permanent darkness and forever. And indeed, at the end of the cosmos, there will be permanent darkness again. So all the suffering and all the hell and all the violence and all the bloodshed and all the horrors of human consciousness, which was just but a tiny little blip of time within these billions of years of the existence of matter, will ultimately not matter at all anyway. So we're actually going through all this hell for absolutely no reason whatsoever, which makes it even worse, really. I mean, the imperative of human consciousness, once it realizes this, is to cease to exist, because there really is no meaningful thought. There is no meaningful action left in the world. But young people, of course, the confidence of the young, They don't see any of this at all. This realization awaits them as they get older. But as you do get older, of course, you still think that you're young, and you still think you can do things that young people can do, and you still think you can have the confidence that young people have, when in fact you haven't, because this day of Sana or Samhain is 1 year closer to death for all of us, and it is a celebration of death. It is a celebration of death and the goodness of death and the righteousness of death, and the fact that there is no more thought after death, and there's no more pain, and there's no more giving of pain and or receiving of pain. A corpse is the most moral object left of a person, because every person has no morality. We have no goodness to us. We jump at the slightest chance of wickedness if it was to our advantage. And truly have the have the religious people said, we are all sinners because we are all sinners, and there is no redemption apart from death itself. Death is the redemption of the sinner. And then they dreamt up some kind of soul-body dualism whereby, the soul is wafted off and it's judged and then forgiven, and everything's wonderful afterwards, and the body goes to dust. But if consciousness goes to dust with the body, then you don't need metaphysics. It's the application of Occam's razor. You just say, well, death is righteous, and there's no need for any afterlife. Surely, death is judgment enough. If the universe is going to judge the human consciousness for everything that it does, then death is justice enough. So death is a celebration, actually. And I think at this time of the year, one faces one's fear of death, actually, and one's fear of annihilation and obliviation and extinction. And oblivion is not something to be feared. So I say to the Kurds, why do you want a homeland? I say to ISIS, why do you want a Muslim utopia? I say to Donald Trump, why do you want an American dream? I say to Corbyn, why do you want a workers' paradise? And to Boris Johnson, why do you want a capitalist paradise? Why do you want all these things? You want these things because you're afraid of not having them. But at death, all these things will be taken away from you and your loved ones and your families and your future generations. If you create them, it will all be taken away. So, what on earth are you all fighting about? What on earth are you all killing each other for, and putting each other down and conspiring against each other? It doesn't make any sense. It's totally irrational. Existence is primarily irrational. Okay, the only rational thought is that existence could come to an end and should come to an end, and that you should not create any more existence by having children.